Hello, and thank you for joining our third annual Day with DISA. Before the session gets started, let's go over a few things. A copy of the presentation will be available to download once the session has ended under the Materials section. If you have questions about the information in this session, enter them in the Q&A section below, and the speaker will answer them once the session has ended. If we don't get to your question, we'll reach out to you at the end of the conference. If you have questions about the topics or trends that are mentioned throughout Day with DISA and how they pertain to your company, and you'd like to reach out to one of our team members directly, hit the chat icon at the bottom of daywithdisa.com and you'll be connected directly with one of our team members. Thank you for attending live. Each of our live attendees is eligible for our prize drawing at the end of the conference. And each session that you attend live increases your chances of winning either a Nintendo bundle or a brand new iPhone 12. Finally, I'd like to take this time to thank all of our sponsors for their participation in Day with DISA. Specifically, I'd like to call out CRL, our title sponsor for 3 years running. We'd like to thank our platinum sponsors, OraSure, Quest Diagnostics, Samba Safety, and Psychomedics. All of our sponsors' support is greatly appreciated. With that, let's get started. Enjoy your session.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for this session of Day with DISA. Today we'll be talking about the top 10 DOT compliance mistakes that we see from carriers and customers in the DOT realm. Today our speaker is Jay Perez with DISA Global Solutions. He's been in the industry for over 15 years, and he's currently Business Development Manager for DISA. Jay, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Thomas. So happy to be here. Very excited.
Just a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, just go ahead and drop them in the Q&A section down at the bottom right. If we aren't able to get to your specific question at the end of the presentation, we will reach out to you after the conference directly and address your question. Additionally, if you'd like a copy of the presentation, that will be available in the materials area at the bottom right after the presentation. So as we get to the Q&A, PDF will appear there. You'll be able to download that just that easy. Jay, without any further ado, go ahead and take it away.
Awesome, Thomas. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us at Day with DISA and attending this chat. It's a pleasure for me today to share with you some of the wisdoms I've learned throughout my 15-year career here in the transportation industry. I've worked with many top 100 carriers, read a few ATRI research studies, gone over annual FMCSA data, and learned a lot from DISA's very own subject matter experts. Today, we're going to count down the top 10 most common compliance mistakes that I've seen. While some of them could apply a little bit differently to you and your company, I think they're still worth checking out. My name is Jason Perez. Most simply know me as Jay. In my career, I've worked in almost every department, including customer service, medical services, clinic vendor management, the finance department, and most recently, I've been enjoying my days in business development working with customers directly, like you. I'd like to share a quote from Ray Dalio here from Bridgewater Associates, one of the most successful firms in the United States, from his book, Principles. My intent is that you walk away today with practical, tactical advice that you can implement simply and gain some value from. New regulations, 3, 4, and 5-letter agencies, all the fine print you could ever want. That's just really a simple, small piece of compliance. Compliance really is a culture, not just a 10-letter word. The following scenarios and associated risks like out-of-service percent, CSA points impact, potential citations of violations are just examples of what could happen. As many of you know, these can be interpreted differently, and they can also be combined in different ways creatively by enforcing agencies. So, like one of my favorite shows, Law and Order, here's a disclaimer. These are examples. these examples are based on actual events. Incidents, characters, and timeliness have been modified to protect the identities of those involved. Any similarities to maybe you are just purely coincidental. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Number 10, unknowingly allowing a driver to operate with a revoked CDL. This is one I hear a lot from companies that bring new green drivers to orientation. They fly them in from all around the country, bus them to the nearest orientation, to the nearest school, spend tons of money on hotels, meals, to get these drivers qualified. Then all of a sudden, the driver's ready to hit the road. But they recently switched to a local bank account because they've spent some time now in a new city going through training and orientation, and their previous child support payment hasn't gone through. He's now about to go on the road and passing of an inspection station. These are scenarios that happen, and all we can do is prepare. So products like continuous monitoring give employers an average monthly snapshot on the status of a driver's license. This type of post-hire protocol is a must to upkeep compliance, and it covers the void that a single annual MVR leaves. There's a big gap of time between a recurring annual MVR and getting one done almost every month. A lot of our clients are seeing 60% reductions in these incidents after just 90 days. Think about that impact on your organization. Sometimes you just have to spend a little to save a little. There are even some regulations and exemptions that are provided to employers that use this to help encourage them to adopt these types of processes. Number 9, driving a CMV while disqualified from holding a CDL. This is something we commonly see with folks that do not perform criminal background screens on their drivers. Although it's not required by DOT, it's still a best practice. For example, another greenhorn driver, new CDL driver, has recently turned their life around. Due to a rough past, they're having a difficult time finding employment, and they've applied for your trucking company. You've gone ahead and offered them employment. These folks are just trying to earn a living like the rest of us. This driver has a valid home state license, but he forgets, heck, maybe he's even scared to not mention his prior history, that his license has been revoked in another state due to a felony criminal activity. These type of violations ban individuals for the first offense, a 1-year ban. The second offense is typically a lifetime ban. Even though we expect folks to be honest and upfront, things happen, and due diligence is still on the carriers. We must do what we can to ensure we put the right people on the road. Solution. Proper background checks and address traces are essential and crucial for success in a compliant programs. Employers that use proper background checks, address traces, etc., are typically finding better qualified drivers. They still move freight, they still hire drivers like everyone else. Using these best practices for running driver's license checks, and even the use of annual clearinghouse queries, can help employers gain better insight and having safer drivers on the road. Number 8, putting a compliant driver on the road. This is something one of my top 10 carriers have had to deal with on a regular basis. They do anywhere between 150 to 160 pre-employments every Monday alone. And there are times that a simple checkbox is all it takes for Susie at the DMV, who's just doing her job, to downgrade a CDL. Or the driver simply incorrectly notes that they are an in-trust state versus an interstate driver, and now they're crossing state lines. Or maybe a driver doesn't have the correct endorsement for the vehicle type, or a mechanic moving a truck. These are all situations that happen commonly to most carriers. Using a DOT-compliant driver qualification file or application template right off the FMCSA website can help organize the process for employers and keep them within compliance. Digitizing and automating with software wherever possible is also a benefit. There are DOT physicals and electronic DQ software available to folks through TPAs like DISA. All the companies I work with see the benefits of incorporating technology into their process. I mean, Blockbuster didn't think about it, and now look what Netflix is. Western Union should have been PayPal, but they didn't adopt technology quick enough. Technology is our friend, and we really need to use it to our advantage. Number 7, failing to conduct reasonable suspicion test immediately. Imagine a driver hanging out in the lounge, waiting to finish up before hitting the road, chatting with other drivers. And some of the coworkers suspect that this driver may have been drinking because there's a distinct smell coming from their breath. They do the right thing and they notify management. What could be going on here? Did he really just have a few before work? You know the guy. He's come to work every day and seems fine. Maybe it's just diabetic ketosis that's been known to have a similar scent to alcohol. For some of you that may not know, diabetic ketosis is a serious condition that can lead to a diabetic coma, sometimes even death. It happens when your body doesn't get enough glucose or sugar that it needs for energy. Then the body turns to turning fat into energy, which produces ketones, leading to ketosis. Now, is this a substance abuse problem? Is it maybe a medical situation that somebody maybe isn't taking their medicine or maybe having an episode? In any event, now the driver is about to finish their pre-trip and take a load out on the road. This isn't only just problematic for the employer and the bottom line, but it's also important for the general public safety. So, not only does the FMCSA enforce reasonable suspicion training, which all companies should have in place, whether it be with an in-house certified person or through an easy online class offered by most TPAs. But additionally, having a DOT certified collector on staff to collect both urine and breath alcohol tests is an adopted practice I see with many of our carriers. And also the use of non-DOT saliva kits, also for drug and alcohol, with a back confirmation for any positives, has shown to keep compliance at the forefront of most companies. If there's a process in place and people know about it, typically we find that compliance is upheld. Number 6, negligence of regulations that apply. Not knowing is half the problem, but having a problem and not knowing what to do with it, well, that's a whole nother can of worms and can get you into some pretty hot water. For example, what to do with a driver that has a violation in the clearinghouse. This is a new process that just came up this year. A lot of people are still struggling to just sign up, allocate the TPA that's needed, understand what their roles and responsibilities are. Well, if a driver has a violation, it's pretty simple. All they have to do is follow the proper protocols in order to get cleared. The regs, the ECFR, are only a minimum standard for employers. Employers are expected to find and use industry best practices. I'm from the East Coast, And as one of my favorite rappers said, if you don't know, now you know. Biggie Smalls. If you aren't sure, just ask. Use subject matter experts. The industry has tons of them. And time again, in associations and meetings, I've seen the camaraderie in this industry between peers, constantly sharing best practices and knowledge. It's an awesome group to be a part of. In the unfortunate event of a legal case, plaintiff attorneys will pull out everything, put your program on paper for all to see, to stand the test of the legal system. Nobody wants the mega ball type multiplier we see in lawsuits, negligence, or the you could have done better, or the maybe you should have known. In a lawsuit, negligence can multiply the outcome of a trial or of a settlement. So do your best to know what you need to know. Number 5, having an hours of service compliance plan. I'm sure you've heard the quote from Mike Tyson that goes, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, maybe not exactly the same scenario. This could be a little bit different, but you get my point. Not having a plan is detrimental to a program. Planning is crucial. A plan is a goal with steps and timelines. Otherwise, you're just living on hopes and dreams. Drivers are busy, doing a lot of things, trying to get as many hours and miles under their time that they can. Sometimes pen whipping reports when they get back to the terminals. Sometimes ELD systems can fail or not provide the correct reporting. But ultimately, liability is always with the carrier. So, again, do what you can do your best. Successful clients, they have formal processes, people who are accountable, that review and audit laws regularly. They follow tried and true guidance. They consistently coach drivers on proper form, manner, and best practices of using equipment. Additionally, a lot of folks use incentive programs to drive compliance. Competitiveness, contests, and rewards, like maybe some swag or some gift cards, are always a nice treat for folks. And in my opinion, I think it's better to budget for the spend than have to take it out of the bottom line when something unexpected happens, especially if it could have been avoided. Just my thoughts. Number 4, mismanagement of driver qualification files. Now let's imagine having a fragmented program that's nationwide. While our current situations have made us a lot more open to technology like this today, a lot of times folks in different locations are siloed around the United States, and specifically if they're responsible for doing their own compliance. Now, let's think about a company that decides to consolidate all of these compliance practices into like a shared service type format at the corporate headquarters in order to create additional resources at the local level, but also to get a handle on compliance at a corporate level. There's never been an issue before, never been an audit, but the new person accountable notices many inconsistencies with how the files are kept. Sometimes we get stuck in our ways, and compliance takes a real special person to give it 100% and actually do it right. A lot of times when we're having conversations with folks and figuring out what's going on, we hear a lot of times people get a little defensive and say, well, that's the way we've always done it here. That's the way I was taught. Well, nobody told me about the updates. I had no idea. Well, I guess if a tree falls in the wood, does it make a sound? Maybe, maybe not. I guess it only matters when the time comes. But defined protocols and processes for drivers and driver managers are a fundamental concept to keep compliance. Like when mentioned earlier, no plan means you're working with hopes and dreams, and possibly even some unicorns. But protocols combined with fail-safe reporting and reminders of expiring documents make life much easier. Some TPAs offer electronic driver qualification management software. Not only typically do they have features already baked into them, like fail-safes and reporting, all in one place, but they can also be typically customized to suit your company's needs. Perhaps you have other compliance or regulatory needs that need to be addressed. These are a great tool to use as well. But the real secret is working with a company that can do all your DQ services, manage your DQ, review, authenticate your documents from their natural life cycles, like the application, pre-employment testing, research, and annual certificate of violations. By having systems that are automated on the back end, you cannot waste your time uploading and dragging and dropping documents into file folders. Number 3, early notification to drivers of required random testing. This happens way more than I think it would. Maybe it's because I've been in the industry for a long time and I understand randoms, but maybe it's also because the industry is a tight-knit community. A lot of trucking companies are family-owned, privately held. People stay in position for a long time. Maybe you've seen it. A newly hired or newly promoted terminal manager, maybe they're even new to the industry, or somebody's family member. Thinks they're doing a great job by preparing the next few weeks and try to make the jobs for the drivers easier by scheduling their randoms ahead of time. And now they've informed everybody who's on the random selections so that they can plan around the driver's load. This is actually a lot more common than you think. And then a lot of companies also spend a lot of money and a lot of time creating their own randomizer programs and developing compliant algorithms and miss the confidential aspect of notifying team members. Maybe it's sent on a distribution email where folks that are in the pool are also being notified of the selections. This causes a little bit of conflict. So, what do we recommend? Not only does a warning about the testing kind of downplay the spirit of random testing, but it also should be on a need-to-know basis. A third-party administrator and MRO service can provide you an additional barrier to keep information under wraps, and typically can provide additional resources and services like managing your clinic network, managing your DQ files. There's a lot of different things that can be done by a provider. Number 2, clinic provider errors. This is one I often hear, and it is typically clients that hire dedicated or experienced drivers. So, as the story goes, a local experienced driver goes to their local clinic. The driver loves your incentive programs and is now going to leave the competition to work for you. They've used the same clinic for 10 years for their past employer. And today, November 12th, they're showing up for your pre-employment drug test. And there's Susie. She works at the clinic as well as DMV. And she greets the driver and says, "Hey, thanks for coming in. Let's get you set up." Walks them right to the back, but they used the wrong chain of custody for the previous employer. And now you got to wait and hope that that previous employer and that MRO do that change account quick and play nice. So what can we do? Well, in my career in operations and managing clinics and vendors, by and large, clinics actually want to do the right thing and get paid, because that's how it works. We can't pay them if we don't have a chain of custody. We can't pay them if we don't have a DOT physical or a breath alcohol test. Most companies and also many TPAs don't use standardized clinic protocols. Not only does this create consistency throughout your clinic network so that testing is performed in a similar manner, but also the use, many folks will force a clinic to use their own proprietary platform or electronic software that isn't the clinic's norm. In my experience, this typically creates a potential to fail. Communication is key. Document management workflow means to understand the clinic's preferred method of getting documentation. Many clinics use electronic chain of custodies, use electronic DOT physicals, but a lot of times when we force them to use alternate methods, it does delay and we do find ourselves requesting them. So sometimes being smart and adapting to their style is a better way of doing business. This should go without saying, but keeping a good relationship with your clinic and vendors is the best way to do business. Get to know them personally. It really makes a solid go through a lot easier when you need it. Some of the honorable mentions of some of the other violations that we've seen that come up quite often are the following. Well, goes without saying, driving while texting. Not only is this dangerous, but man, we see it happen way, way too often. Operating while ill or fatigued. Hours of service compliance, working while feeling under the weather. Drivers are constantly assessing risk while on the road. They're expected to be 100% aware of their surroundings, vigilant of the flow of traffic, and prepared for the unexpected. This requires a good amount of rest and health. Make sure your drivers know it's okay to take themselves off the road until they're 100%. Their lives, their careers, and the folks on the road all need them to. My personal favorite, and I like to refer to as the IQ test, is smoking within 25 feet of a hazmat vehicle. I mean, really, what could go wrong with hauling a tanker full of gas and smoking a butt? Who knows? And now for number one, failure to review a medical card or medical exam. Not only, as we mentioned earlier, can a clerical error downgrade a license at DOV, but also ensuring DOT examiners talk and confirm with drivers regarding compliance with their medications and treatments is very overlooked. We see it all the time in the driver health history. A check yes to use of drugs, past medical history or surgeries, or maybe even they're on medications and treatments. We want to know, and we should know, or at least, at the very least, the DOT examiner should know, are they compliant with their medication? Are they taking their insulin? Are they taking their medications at the right times? Are they using their sleep apnea machine? All of these are things that should be addressed and should be discussed at the time of exam. And a lot of times, that 15-minute DOT test, man, they can miss a thing or two, believe it or not. Many times when we bring these issues and oversights to the attention of the medical examiners, they're actually appreciative. And apologize for the oversight. And they'll change the status of a card. And don't be afraid. It works both ways. A lot of times, we could have a provider who's maybe too strict and only gives a 3-month card when we have supporting documentation, and we could get them a longer card. Or maybe, like one of my favorite instances, you have somebody who's been diagnosed with sleep apnea and they've never started treatment. So again, it's our job to make sure we put the safest drivers on the road. It's the medical examiner's job to ensure they go over the health history and comment on every yes answer the driver has entered. So what we find, be familiar with the medical examiner's handbook. It's available online. You can easily search, query any keyword. Be aware of which drivers have skills performance evaluations, and make sure they're knowledgeable about it and always have it on them. And always coach your drivers on best practices when going to take a DOT medical. Make sure they understand their medications, make sure they have that prepared, make sure they are able to speak to the doctor and get any questions that they need answered as well. So in concluding these top 10, just wanted to share with you another piece from an article from a study that was done in 2020 by ATRI, and it was also published by Transportation Topics. It was noted that 5 specific factors, just five, yielded 100% verdicts in favor of the plaintiff. Otherwise, other ways to say it is you're gonna lose in a court of law. In 2006, there were only 4 verdicts of $1 million or more. However, in 2013, over 70 cases had verdicts of over $1 million. There were over 600 cases analyzed recently in that time frame, with 10 million, with a big M, like McDonald's or higher, that defined what we now know as a nuclear verdict. These 5 specific factors included hours of service or logbook violations, lack of a clean driving history, and again, people get hired, things happen in between. Driving while under the influence, is it ketosis? Did he have a few? Fleeing the scene of a crash, I mean, can't fix stupid. Or one of the ones that's very close to me, driver health related issues. The time between the crash date and the verdicts increased sizably over the last couple of years. Also, crashes involving children or fatalities is the single largest verdict, with over $27 million on average. The presence of a defense expert witness also decreases the size of verdicts considerably. So something else to think about. Thank you so much for your time. Want to go over and start with some of the questions that have been asked. Thomas?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jay. And you're absolutely right. We do have a decent number of questions. The first question that I've received is, will the clearinghouse prevent revoked CDLs?
Yeah. Once the CDLs, once the clearinghouse has gone through its 3 years, basically, of gathering data, it's going to start covering what was typically done through the PSP and through the SID list. So yes, the clearinghouse is going to be a great tool, not only for an initial, but also throughout the life cycle of that driver.
But just to follow up, currently for the first 3 years, it won't prevent revoked CDLs?
Not completely, no. We would want to use a product more similar to continuous driver monitoring that we offer in order to get those, real-time updates, if you will.
Gotcha. Next question is, I don't want to go above and beyond. Am I legally covered if I follow the minimum regulations?
I mean, you're legally covered until you go to trial, and they're going to ask you, well, were you aware of driver monitoring? Have you seen that this medical, DOT medical, was blank? Everything's legal until you get caught.
So Jay, you've mentioned continuous driver monitoring twice. I know it was mentioned in the presentation. What exactly does that include? Are there different services there? What is it exactly?
Great question, actually. Yeah, so there's two basic products with continuous monitoring. One is the, on average, 30-day snapshot of the motor vehicle record itself. So the status, whether it's suspended, revoked, active, in good standing. And then we also have a product which is more of a CSA monitoring. So we can actually see your driver's CSA score, your company's CSA score, and start to look at the different categories that we're seeing violations in.
Yeah, that sounds super helpful to a trucking company.
People swear by it.
Yeah, I can imagine why. Going 11 months with a unlicensed driver, not ideal.
Not only that, but a lot of folks, actually, you bring up a good point. A lot of folks that use owner-operators or contractor drivers, they're not always on your books. So they could have had an accident with another trucking company that's unbeknownst to you. So good. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. So who qualifies as a non-compliant driver?
So non-compliant drivers could be anybody who is restricted, like we mentioned, a felony, or somebody whose paperwork is FUBAR'd, So a lot of times folks will check the wrong box. If you were flipping burgers yesterday and now you have this DOT medical, what's a CLP? What's a learner's permit? You know what I mean? I'm going for a truck driving job. So again, sometimes folks kind of shoot themselves in the foot without knowing.
So Jay, I have two questions kind of along the reasonable suspicion training line of thought that came in. How long do I have to conduct a reasonable suspicion test?
Well, as a best practice, you want to get those done immediately. We always say that you can always do a DOT test and downgrade it, but you can't do a non-DOT test and upgrade it. A lot of drugs like alcohol will be out of your system within 8 hours. Some other drugs, meth, coke, things like that, they could be out of your body within 24. So as a best practice, do it as soon as you think there's a problem.
And then the other question in that line of thinking was, where can I get reasonable suspicion training, and who needs to have reasonable suspicion training? Is that anyone that sends someone for reasonable suspicion, or is it whoever the official person over their program is?
Well, DER should always have it, but realistically, anybody who's in a leadership position, driver managers, people that are going to be interacting with the drivers, is always a good set of eyes to have to be vigilant of these situations. And as far as where is it offered, DISA actually offers it online, which makes it super convenient, especially for folks that are maybe not all able to meet in one room, so socially distant approved. But there's a lot of resources out there as well.
Yeah, especially now that comes in handy being online. Where can I find information or in-depth training to avoid what you were talking about, the negligence of the regulations?
So I actually use a lot of, I call them cheat sheets, but there's a lot of public information. So FMCSA has some questions and answer section that relate to applicability. So they give real life scenarios of situation and how DOT and FMCSA actually interpret that. So that's one resource. And then also the ECFR, so that 392 dot whatever that everybody always talks about, that's electronic. So you can go to their website and with keywords, drug test, driver qualification file, whatever you may think of, you could keyword it and it'll actually start to search that data for you. So I found it super helpful.
Great. Is there somewhere I can get a template plan for my HOS program?
Of course. So not only can you get a template for hours of service compliance, as far as the violations and the things that you should be looking for off the FMCSA website, but you can also get DOT compliant applications. You can also get DOT compliant driver qualification templates. The information's out there. A lot of times it's just understanding it, digesting it, and obviously sourcing it.
And then I don't think we explicitly talked about ELDs today, but one of the questions that came in is, do I have to use one? An ELD?
Yeah, so most folks are going to have to use one. There are some exceptions that could apply, such as farmers or utilities companies, things like that. But by and large, you're going to have to use an ELD.
And then you talked about DQ files. One question that came in along that was, what's included in a driver qualification file?
Well, there's a lot of different things that are required in the driver qualification file. Some of them are like your application, your MVR, your initial MVR, negative drug test. A lot of folks will require the drug test, and as a best practice, they'll also include the chain of custody. So not only the drug test result, but the chain of custody, copy of the medical card. So there's a lot of different items there.
Gotcha.
And some of them expire too, so you want to make sure you're aware of those.
Okay, so some of them have annual or semi-annual expiration dates, so it's not just a one and done.
Yeah, correct. It's a live, breathing document that you'll need to continue to look over, and they're all going to change at different times too, so something else to keep in mind.
Great. Can I notify managers of their team's upcoming tests?
Yeah, so really the rule of thumb is as long as you're not in the random pool yourself, you can be notified. But again, you want to keep that on a need-to-know basis.
Another question, what is the process for account change on a drug screen and who initiates it? And I think that's talking about when you were talking about if it went to the wrong employer and they needed to contact the MRO?
Yeah. Yes. So this happens quite a bit and quite often. There's a lot of finger pointing. We have really taken an initiative with some of our programs and some of our clients where we do a lot of the hand-holding and the managing of their results. So we're not the typical TPA that just, provides you a digital network and walks away. We're actually going to follow up, if you like, on that paperwork to ensure it gets done. We're going to be reviewing and requesting those chain of custody. So again, those protocols are important. To see those chain of custodies come over, we initiate them typically when we're reviewing them. However, whoever gets it first should know what they're looking at and initiate the process. It can be initiated by the collection site, it can be initiated by the lab, or it could be initiated by the MRO. Typically, the lab is not going to do it. So it usually falls more on the MRO and the employer.
So if you're that employee, would you reach out to one of them and ask them to start that process? If you're the former employee?
You may not even know. You may not even be aware. Most people find out when they don't get a drug test result. So we hear it all the time. You'll have a driver who goes in on a Monday, and all of a sudden it's Thursday and no drug test back. They're calling their driver says, hey, I went, but there's the results sitting from the lab at the TPA, but because there's no chain of custody, it can't fly out. So usually, like I said, most people find out when it's already a big problem. So that's why reviewing it, keeping track of your orders, making sure, you're on top of things is crucial for the best turnaround time.
Yeah, that's brutal. So why can't I use ECCF for breath alcohol tests?
Funny, people ask that all the time because it seems to be the one piece of document that suffers the most. In their infinite wisdom, FMCSA has not actually approved an breath alcohol test. So you still actually need that receipt paper printout that has the calibration date and the results right on it.
Okay. What defines ill for a CMV driver?
Oh, great. Yeah, so that's up for interpretation, and applicability can vary. But realistically, an ill driver is anyone who has a abnormal condition, fever, cough, sneezing fit, maybe a tummy ache, who knows, that's going to deter them from driving and being focused on the road. So really, you want to open those lines of communication with your drivers to let them know it's okay. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to pull over. You know, their lives and the lives of the folks on the road are way more important.
Okay. Isn't reviewing a medical card a HIPAA violation?
So this is a topic that folks go back and forth on quite a bit. However, due to the nature of the DOT physical being part of a safety-sensitive position, this isn't directly affected by HIPAA. We as employers must ensure that a driver or employee is able to perform the essential job functions as required by FMCSA.
Okay. Can I perform my own collections?
Yes.
And there's a follow-up to that of how difficult is it to be a DOT collector certified?
So, great question. This is a topic that either it's a little icky, folks don't like to, deal with the specimens, if you will. But it's a great way to save money. So it's super simple. You can go and do your training online and even do your mock collection training online to be a certified collector. You could also be a train the trainer. So within your organization, you could have somebody who is designated as a train the trainer to train the rest of your team. And then buying equipment, most labs will provide you supplies for free. There are listed approved breath alcohol test devices as low as a couple $100 even on Amazon. So it's a pretty simple lift if you're willing to take it on.
And Jay, just to clarify, when we say perform your own collections, what you're referring to is an employer performing them, not an individual performing their own collection, correct?
Correct. Yeah, so in most cases, unless it's a saliva test, the testing is performed with a collector. Some saliva tests are self-administered, but yes, this would be a employer representative, not necessarily a DER, but somebody who's with the company collecting another individual's from the company's drug test or breath alcohol test.
Okay. Hey, Jay, I think we're out of time here. I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time and your knowledge with the group. Any final words before we wrap up?
No, it's been a great experience. The questions were awesome. Thank you so much. I look forward to working with everyone. Feel free to follow me on LinkedIn, constantly posting best practices, things that are up to date in the industry, and some of the great news that DISA's marketing team shares with us. So look forward to hopefully hearing from some of you folks soon. Great.
And the other thing I'll say is if we didn't get to your question specifically today, we'll have someone reach out after Day with DISA and touch base with you directly. Additionally, if you'd like a copy of the presentation, that is available in the materials section at the bottom right. And thank you so much for joining us today, and have a great day.
Thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe.